You're listening to the weekly Dartscast, and now your co-hosts, one-time UK Open Riley's qualifier participant Alex Moss and the one-time VIP guest of Barry Hearn, Burton DeWitt. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss and with me it is Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. Dartsmith is up and running. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and we just watched one of, if not the best sessions of the tournament just before recording this. I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing good too, thank you. Yeah, let's get straight into the darts that we've seen this week, the start of the PDC World Championship, and I guess one of the biggest, most talked about games heading into these first couple of rounds was the tie between Fallon Sherrock and Steve Beaton. Steve Beaton coming through a 3-2 winner tonight when we're recording this, all the way to a deciding set, but no repeat for the Queen of the Palace from 2 years ago. But how did you rate Fallon's encore performance?
Well, it really was a tale of two matches for both players. And you look at those first two sets, and they were both incredible. Steve Beaton, through 10 legs, was averaging nearly 10 points on. The highest average he had ever had in a World Championship was averaging over 105. Fallon was averaging over a ton. Both of those sets could have easily swung either direction. Both went the distance and both had chances. And they were both creating chances. And, you look, not just the 180s, but Steve Beaton, a 177 and a 174 setup shot. Fallon, a 177 in the first set that she didn't even get the darted double after because Steve Beaton checked it out to win the set. So they were both playing at this incredible standard, and you knew it was likely to dip. No matter how good you are, you will dip. But the second half of the match really was unexpected, just how much both of them really seemed to struggle. Fallon in the third set just disappeared. Steve Beaton in the fourth set disappeared. And neither of them were really playing that much better in the sets they won. They just were playing at some more of a competent level than their opponent. And then the fifth set was just a slog, but credit to Steve Beaton where it was due. He hit the shots in the key moments and didn't really lift his game so much, but just stayed steady enough in that fifth set to get over the line. For Fallon, she will be and should be disappointed because we've seen so much better from her. Not just, those first 10 legs where she was playing at a phenomenal level, but we've seen her be able to maintain that against Peter Wright in Wolverhampton, against Michael van Guren in Denmark. Yes, she lost that match in the end, but she didn't regress nearly to the extent that she did in this match. So I think I'd rate her encore as a C. The first half of the match unquestionably was an A. The second half was more of a D. So I'll give her a C for her encore. We know she's better than this. We know she has more to give than this. But credit to Steve Beaton because he hung with her when she was hitting everything, throwing everything at him. And then he managed to get over the line with the key shots and the key moments.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It was a strange game, really. We saw the start of it. Both players did come out of the traps very quickly, as you say. We had Steve Beaton averaging 105, best part of 105 for those first two sets, and Fallon was keeping with Steve the whole time as well. Both those first sets going the full 5 legs. Then the averages dipped a little bit, didn't they? We saw Steve win that third set with an 80 average, Fallon averaging 74 in that one. She picked up her game to return the favour in the fourth set, win it 3-0 with a 88 average, and Steve really didn't pick up his game to where it was in those first two sets. He stayed at around the high 70s, low 80s, but in the deciding set, Fallon just couldn't quite get going and loses the final set 3-1. And as far as an encore, it was always going to be difficult to try and match or even better what she did 2 years ago, because that was something that we'd never seen before, making history like she did. But I think going into the tournament, she would have liked her draw that she had. Steve Beaton's not had the best last couple of years, you'd say. He's dropped down the rankings. He's outside the top 32. He's bordering on the top 50, around that range at the moment. So I think she'd have been happy with the draw. But we saw Steve Beaton roll back the years in those first two sets. And, okay, his level dropped after that, but he was able to get over the line. And now for Fallon, all the focus is going to be on Q-School, isn't it? I don't think we're expecting the PDC to come out and give Fallon a tour card or anything like that. I know there's a lot of talk about the Premier League. I think that's probably been put on hold now after going out in the first round, and that's not just because it's Fallon Sherrick. I think we could say that every year when we get to this tournament, there's players that we tip to maybe be an outside pick for the Premier League, and they go out first, second round of the World Championship, and that really does put their hopes to an end for a year. So I think the Premier League's going to be a bit too soon for Fallon. Now all the attention will be on Q School, and if she can bring her A game to Q School, then you do fancy her to get that tour card. But I think she's going there knowing that she's a better player than she was 2 years ago when she had all those achievements at Ali Pali. It's now, can she put it all together for that week in Milton Keynes, not far for her to go, and see if she can get that tour card.
Now, the big four, which, of course, are the top three in the world, plus Johnny Clayton, all through to the third round, although they all face varying levels of scares in the second round. Which of the four, though, would you say is most likely, or looks most likely, to lift the trophy after Christmas?
I think I'm going to stick with the tip I had at the start of the tournament, and that is Going Price. But considering what we've just seen from Johnny Clayton in the last 15, 20 minutes, I think his case has grown a lot stronger, hasn't it? And yes, he was 2-1 down to Keane Barry, who was producing some unbelievable finishing, both players finishing up with just the 5-ton plus finishes each. But the way he turned that game round, he was 2-1 down, lost the opening leg of that fourth set and reels off 6 legs, averaging around 113, 114 for those last 6 legs, was pretty special stuff. And this is someone that has had such a great year on the tour, winning all these titles on TV. But as far as Ali Pali goes, that's not somewhere where we've seen him produce his best darts. But 103 average, and the way that he finished the game when he was up against it, that's a big tick in the box for me. And the next round, the last 32, that's the round that he's gone out in the past. That's the furthest he's got. That's going to be the big hurdle for me if he can get over that one, get to the furthest that he's ever gone. And I think he'll take plenty of confidence from what he's done tonight when he's had to come from behind to beat someone playing as well as Keane Barry did. 95, almost 96 average from him, who should be really proud of himself, what he's been able to do on the Ali Pali stage this year. But yeah, I think Johnny Clayton has got to be fancying his chances even more so now after coming through that first one. And Gerwyn Price as well. He was a set down, but produced some superb stuff. The 130 finish was, the amount of pressure that there is for a defending champion on that opening night at Ali Pali to get through and keep your title defence going beyond that first hurdle. There's a lot on his shoulders, but he produced it, didn't he? 101 average, came through it 3-1, some big shots when he needed to. I still think I'm going to go with Gerwyn Price at this moment in time, but from what I've seen from the other of the big three, the big four, Johnny Clayton's got to be right up there. Peter Wright, it was an okay performance from him. He wasn't really tested by Ryan Meikle, unfortunately, in that one. We were more interested in seeing what fancy dress he was going to turn up in, because he always tries to outdo himself each year with the festive fancy dress for his first game. But he's got over that first hurdle. Michael van Gerwen as well, dropping the first set to Chaz Barstow, but he came through it. The big four all through to the last 32. But I'm sticking with Gerwyn Price for now. But Johnny Clayton has definitely gone up in my estimations as well as a potential winner again.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he has no chance to win it because we both tipped him to win the title. So I guess whoever's most likely to lift the trophy or looks most likely to lift the trophy is whoever we're least likely to say right now. So I guess it's Peter Wright then? I know. I think I also can't change away from Gerwyn Price from what I saw, especially after how poor he was in the first set and how everything seemed to be going against him. But he stayed true. He believed in himself, and he lifted his game at the right times and got himself back into it. You mentioned that 130 out. We'll see what happens over the next couple weeks, but not as big yet as Peter Wright's against Noel Malakdom a couple years ago. But if he does go on to retain the trophy, it will be one of the biggest second round checkouts we've ever seen, just because it did swing that match. And Richie Eddowes played really well. In the end, he didn't have the game to match Gerwyn Price, because almost no one would have had the game to match Gerwyn Price after that first set. Johnny Clayton, though, that was the performance so far of the tournament, because Keane Barry didn't do anything wrong until he just ran out of steam after Johnny Clayton's 150 checkout. Maybe that one, if Johnny Clayton goes on to win the trophy, we can mention that one as well. But Johnny Clayton just was unbelievable those last 6 legs, and he wasn't all that poor before that. It was just Keenberry was throwing 100 average at him, and Keenberry was doing more than Johnny Clayton. That's why he was up 2-1 at the right times. But those last 6 legs averaging 113, starting with that 150 out and just finishing with a pair of double 12s in the last 2 legs. Every dart, every visit was a great visit, and every dart, or almost every dart, seemed like it was bang in the middle of the treble or double. That's the focus and the concentration that Johnny Clayton showed to get back in that match. And if he can keep that up for the rest of this tournament, he's just as likely as Gerwyn Price. And assuming they get to play each other in the quarterfinal, that could be one of the great matches ever on the Alexandra Palace stage. Peter Wright, I think you said it best, Ryan Meikle just didn't show up for that. So Peter Wright didn't have much to do other than show off what he was wearing in. And one of the sets ran a little close, but beyond that, Peter Wright never really was in danger. And then Michael Van Gerwen did not look himself for much of that match. The 3-1 score, especially on the finishing, I should say. And he gave away that first set. And that's, what I've been saying about that fear of winning, that fear of the finish line. Okay, it was only a set finish line, but other than 1 or 2 of those 9 darts at double, they were not well thrown. They were missing by a lot. They were missing in ways that were blocking him. And that's not Michael Van Gerwen. He doesn't miss doubles and clumps. And when he does, you can usually say they were well thrown darts. But he found it at the right times, like I said, for everyone else, and he got over the line. And having a match like that will help him as he tries to retain this trophy, to know that he can be playing poorly, he can be in a deficit of his own creation, but that he can still get himself back in and finish and win in the end fairly comfortably. So it was a good experience for Van Gerwen, I think, to get this match. But there are still a lot of questions, and that's why I'm not changing my pick quite yet. I'm going that Gezi is still the most likely.
And now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show, and it is with the 9-dart man, William Borland.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the 9-dart man himself, Willie Borland. Willie, how you doing?
I'm doing good, mate. Yeah, how's yourself?
Doing well, thank you. I appreciate the time. And firstly, I'll just ask your manager, Matt, this as well, but how many times have you watched back that 9-darter from Friday night?
I've watched it back a good few times. It came from absolutely nowhere. And as I said, I'm just buzzing to get the win. First time on the Ali Pali stage, I'm just happy to get the win there and progress to the second round.
Well, we last had you on the show around this time last year, a year on, heading into Ali Pali, the last event of the season. How were you reflecting on 2021?
Obviously, it's been a good year for myself. More competitions have happened, and I've managed to play well and progress and qualify for competitions that I wouldn't even think twice about qualifying for. Obviously, the first year, I only got about 4 or 5 months of actual competitive darts due to COVID, and it was just good to get more or less. It still wasn't a full year, but it was more or less a full year of playing, and it's helped me progress and be where I am today.
I mean, before the World Championship, the win over Simon Whitlock at the European Championship, that's got to be one of the standout moments of the year. What did that win mean to you, to get a big win on TV like that?
Obviously, it meant the world to me. Obviously, it was good. It meant the world to me for qualifying for that competition, as we both know how hard it is to qualify for the European Championships, due to like the qualifying criteria to even qualify for a Euro Tour. So to get there was absolutely unbelievable, and now I'm just looking forward to what the future holds now.
Going into Ali Pali, you were on the brink of the top 64. Now your tour card looks safe for 2022. How much of a boost is that to know that you will not have to go to Q School next month?
Well, it's a massive boost. Obviously, due to the pandemic, Q School's the way it's run now as well, it's kind of changed, and to be fair, it was hard enough the way I qualified, and it just looks 10 times harder now. So yeah, I'm glad to be keeping my card, but I knew before coming into Ali Pali that even if I lost to Brad, that I would there was still a massive chance of possibly keeping the card. So I just thought about trying to get the win and securing that, and I did. And I'm over the moon. I can't wait for another year on the tour, and hopefully many more to come.
Well, let's get on to your game with Bradley Brooks on Friday night, a battle of two of the rising stars in the PDC. How were you feeling as you made that walk at Ali Pali for the first time?
It was unbelievable to walk out to Ali Pali. Was genuinely one of the best moments of my life. It's obviously the biggest tournament in world darts, and to have my friends there who sponsored me, and my cousin was down as well. He was in the crowd. It was just good for it was good for myself, and watching all the videos back from my hometown, all my local friends and stuff supporting me was just absolutely phenomenal.
And the match goes all the way to a final set, a last leg decider. What were you thinking as you went to the Oki to play that final leg? Did you ever imagine a 9-darter could be on the cards?
I definitely didn't. I knew I was playing well. We both were playing well. Like if you ever speak to Brad will tell you himself, we have such ding dong battles together. Like, we've played each other a few times on the development tour, and obviously we've played a couple of times on the Pro Tour as well. We were laughing and joking about it in the players' room. I remember my first ever development tour, when I met Brad. We were at a local competition on the Friday night, and we played each other in the final, and he's like, look where we've came. We've went from playing in the local final in a pub to playing on the biggest stage in the world, and we were just laughing and joking about it. But hats off to Brad. He played well, and I'm just happy to get over the line.
Definitely. Well, a 180, a 177 to leave the 144 after 6 darts. What's going through your head as you step up to throw for that 144?
Well, when I started off the leg, I hit the 180. I just went to myself, right, 15 darts or less to win the match. That was the focus in that leg. And then when the 177 went in, I just automatically thought about the Joe Cullen match from Salzburg, and obviously I went on to lose the leg. I was like, right, just make sure you leave it handy, and if the 2 trebles go in, just make sure you just go for it. And if obviously the 2 trebles went in, and I just knew it was going to go in, so I'm happy to get the 9-darter also. Yeah,
the 144 goes in. You create a moment of history, the first player to win a match with a 9-darter in a decider at the World Championship. What has the last 24-36 hours been like since it happened?
It's been crazy. Like, my phone's never stopped going. All my friends texting me. Majority of the local community in East Calder have been texting me as well. I've not really slept. You know what I mean? It's like, for me, like, it's surreal just to be playing at the Ali Pali, but like, to make like history for that as well. It's like absolutely surreal, because it's what I've dreamed of my whole life. And I'm just, as I said, I'm just happy to get the win, and we go on to Wednesday.
Well, we saw a lot of messages for you on social media, even one from Phil Taylor, the 16-time world champion. What has your phone been like since Friday? Has it stopped going off yet?
It's calmed down quite a bit. Just there are a few of my friends' group chats still going wild and stuff, but it's calmed down now. So it's starting to sink in a bit now. But as I said, like, I've hardly slept a wink with pure buzz. So now I'm going to have a couple of days rest. Obviously, going to see Spider-Man later on with Matt, and then we'll get back on the practice board as well, and just come back down to earth and get ready for Wednesday.
I mean, does that help in a way? You're not going to play your next game until Wednesday afternoon against Ryan, that you've got a few days to let everything sink in, rather than some players, they've played the first round and the next day they're back on. Is it good for you to have that break to let things die down a little bit?
No, definitely. I think, like, if I was on, if I was on again, like, the next day or like a couple of days after, I would have been fine, but the thing, like, with me knowing that I'm going to be playing Wednesday, I'm just giving myself extra time, because it is such a good moment in my career. So, but now I'll be fully focused and ready to go against Ryan. I know fully what to expect, so I'm looking forward to the game.
And what is the plan between now and Wednesday when you get back up on that stage? With these events like the World Championship, the breaks between matches, probably not something that you've had too much experience of. So what is the plan between now and then?
I'm just, as I said, I'm going to continue practicing on my doubles and my scoring as well. So I'm not going to be obviously I wouldn't say there's too much to work on, but just as long as I keep throwing on the practice board and that and keep my arm going, then I'll be very dangerous in the game.
And lastly, I know your manager Matt joked what was better, Scotland's 0-0 draw with England at the Euros or the 9-darter. Was it the 9-darter?
Oh, 100% the 9-darter. You can't celebrate draws.
Good man. Well, Willie, it's a pleasure to chat to you. Congratulations again on the moment, the 9-darter and the win. And we wish you all the best for the second round against Ryan Searle on Wednesday.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you.
Thanks again to Willie for joining us. Now, a 9-darter in a deciding leg to win a match in the World Championship. Was Willie's the best 9-darter ever?
Unquestionably. Nothing, no 9-darter I've ever seen or heard of comes close. At least in a televised event or in any PDC event. Is there the potential that some tournament somewhere in the world was won on a 9-darter in a last leg shootout? Sure. Would that be bigger than the one that Willie Borland had? I don't think so, but you can make an argument that any 9-dart leg to win a title in a last leg shootout would rival this, no matter how small the title. But even still, it wouldn't really, because this is the World Championships. This is a match on debut at the World Championships against someone playing really well who was fighting for his tour card. And if Willie Borland doesn't come through, okay, he didn't need to finish off the leg in 9 to win the match. But if he doesn't come out with a 180 and follow that up with another 180, he might be losing that match. That second 180 took everything out of Bradley Brooks. And at that point, it was just making sure that Borland could close out the leg, and boy, did he ever. But it's a last leg shootout at the World Championships. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that in this answer, but it bears repeating over and over again, because I don't care about Phil Taylor having 2 in a match. I don't care about Brendan Dolan having the double in, the first one ever. I don't care about Mensur Sulevic's famous 170, 170, 161. That is probably the most difficult 9-dart leg ever hit, because it required 3 doubles. When, at least in PDC play, I don't think there's any other that require, well, there's no other that required 3. The only other ones to require 2 were the ones in Dublin where you had to double in. It was in the last leg shootout of a match at the World Championships. I'm not going to say it a 6th time, because it doesn't need to be said a 6th time. That is why, unquestionably, it was the best 9-darter ever. I said it right afterwards. A lot of other people said it right afterwards, because it was. Please take the other point of view if you want to, Alex. I'd love to see you argue something different, but I just don't see how you can. It was and is the greatest 9-darter ever, and it will take someone doing it in a later round in the same situation, potentially in the final, for it to be bigger.
Well, I thought that Darius Labanauskas' 9-darter the next day was a better 9-darter. No, in all seriousness, I think it's there's a strong case, isn't there, that it is the best we've ever seen in a TV event, and courtesy of Richard Ashdown, that was the 63rd televised 9-darter we've seen. Darius getting the 64th less than 24 hours later. So there's been a few to choose from over the years, but as you say, there's never been one in a deciding leg in a World Championship to win a match as Willie Borland did. It was quite something, wasn't it? And you've just heard from Willie Borland. You're going to hear from his manager Matt Ward of MDA Promotions a little bit later as well, and he actually said that he thought that 9-darter, that moment, was a better moment than watching Daryl Gurney win major titles and all the other wins that he's seen from his players. So that kind of tells you, from someone like him who's been involved in the game and he's been involved with all these players, how much that moment was. And yeah, it's difficult to look beyond it. I don't want to be doing too much recency bias on it, which we can all creep into at times, but I think it's hard to pick one better than that. It's definitely in my top 3, and I was jotting down a few of the 9-darters that I was thinking of that could maybe potentially rival that. And you mentioned a few of them there, the Phil Taylor 2 against James Wade in that Premier League final, I think 2010. To get 2 in a game is really something. So I think that's in my top 3. And I'll give a mention to Sean Greatbatch as well, because he got the first ever one on live TV back in 2002, the Dutch Open final, which is a relative short format compared to these other games. But that was a pretty iconic moment, and to then be called 9-darter for the next 20 years, it is something as well. But yeah, I think I'm putting those 3 in my top 3. I'm just not sure whether I'm going to put it as my number one at the moment. But I think when I think back to it in a few weeks' time, and I must have watched that 9-darter probably more than any other 9-darter, because it was just something that we never expected to see. And in that moment, a critical moment like that, it does take some stopping. So I'm expecting this poll to be pretty one-sided. A lot of our listeners to vote that it is the best 9-darter, but I'm not quite ready to commit to it just yet.
Ooh, oh, I'll take that as disagreeing, since I thought it was unquestionably the greatest. Now, it'll be a little bit of a disjointed show the way we're recording this, because we want to make sure to get this out ahead of play on Monday. So we're recording some of this before Sunday evening's play. Obviously, some of the stuff you guys have already heard us discuss, we had to record after Sunday evening's play. So as of the time we're speaking now, we don't yet know, for instance, whether Fallon Sherrick beat Steve Beaton or not. So we don't know as many of the next set of second round matches as you will by the time you're listening. But are there any, at least that as of right now, are set in stone of those second round matches, or the remaining handful of first round matches that you're looking forward to this week?
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's been a marathon start to the tournament, hasn't it? We've got 64 matches in 16 sessions. We're pretty much halfway through it now, maybe just over halfway through it as we're recording, to get to that Christmas break with just the 32 players left. But yeah, we've got 4 more days before we have the Christmas break, and I'll pick one match from each of the next 4 days that we've got to look forward to, starting with the Monday. And the one that really does jump off the page is, we just talked about Fallon Sherrick coming back to Ali Pali. Well, it's got to be Raymond van Barneveld coming back to Ali Pali, going up against Lawrence Largan, who's someone that I think you could ask any darts fan. They all love watching him play, because he's quite a character on the stage, but he's not had a big win on TV for a while. So maybe this is his chance to do that and get a win. I know we've spoken in the past about players coming over for the World Championship, particularly last year and this year, that haven't had as many playing opportunities, the international qualifiers. So a little bit concerned maybe about what form Lawrence will bring to the stage. But of course, the big thing about that game is what Raymond van Barneveld is going to turn up on the stage, because his last 2 World Championship campaigns have both ended very early. So I'm sure he'll want to avoid another one of those. And Lawrence, as I say, is a tricky customer. Going on to the Tuesday session, and there's a double session on Tuesday. I'm going to miss quite a lot of the afternoons due to work, but I should be available for the evenings. And the game that finishes off Tuesday, Devon Peterson against Raymond Smith. I thought Raymond Smith performed very well against Jamie Hughes, and Jamie Hughes as well, I thought, played very well. That was a great first round tie, and Raymond getting the win on stage, his first win at Ali Pali. And he's going up against Devon Peterson, who 12 months ago was coming into the World Championships. Quite a few people were tipping him as a dark horse. He won that Euro Tour title. He was pushing up the rankings. He was into the top 32. But the last 12 months, he's not really done too much. He's not pulled too many trees. So for me, I think that one is a really interesting tie to see if we could see one of the international qualifiers get through to that last 32. And I think Raymond Smith definitely has a shot at doing that. On the Wednesday, I think the one for me is that first game of the afternoon, Ryan Searle against Willie Borland. Willie Borland back on the stage after doing what he did on Friday night. Ryan Searle is someone that I mentioned, dark horses. Ryan Searle is someone that's been tipped up quite a bit for this World Championship. He's got to a major final recently. Can he go on a deep run at Ali Pali, and who knows, maybe put himself really in the mix to be in the Premier League? But he's got a tough first game there against Willie Borland. And then I'll finish up with the Thursday, and the one that I'm really looking forward to at the moment from the games that we do know the full lineup for, it's got to be Brendan Dolan against Callum Ridds. We spoke about it on the show in our preview show, saying that this was potentially a second round tie that we're really looking forward to. And Callum got through the first round at the weekend. He's going up against Brendan Dolan, who's one of the form players, you'd say, from that list of maybe 17 to 32 in the seedings. And Callum Ridds as well. He's on the brink of that top 32. He's in it provisionally. Didn't quite get in there before Ali Pali, so that's why he's going up against one of the 32 seeds. But that one, I think, has got the potential to go the full 5 sets.
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple of the same ones you did, and I'll do it the same way you did, picking one from each session. There's something to be said about quite a few of the matches on the Monday. Mike Ivanhoven looked all right in patches against Kai Smith. and he'll have to up his game against James White, but that could be an interesting match. We don't know much about Ben Robb. We've seen a little in World Series events, but going against Jake Rodriguez, who's been one of the form players, another good match. Obviously, Luke Woodhouse just continues to be a steady player going against a resurgent James Wilson. All three really good matches, but I have to agree with you. That Raymond Van Barneveld Lawrence Ilagan match, it has the potential to be an all-time epic. We know, of course, Barney's a 5-time world champion, his first match here since coming out of retirement, but Lawrence Ilagan's a world-class player. And, we've seen some of the stuff he's been able to do on the Asian tour. If he ever comes over and gives Steel Tip a real full go, I think he's a mighty competitor, and he'll have every chance in that match. I think that's a match that really could go either way, and whoever wins that match will be fancying themselves to maybe pull an upset in the next round and make it past Christmas. As far as the Tuesday goes, I'll go with a different one than you, and maybe this goes against what I said at the introduction to the question of matches we already know, because we don't yet know who Dimitri Vandenberg is going to play. But regardless who he ends up going against, whether it's Florian Hempel or Martin Schindler, I think that's going to be a really interesting match. And whoever gets through that, let me add also, I don't care what happens in the match, or happened by the time you're listening, in the match between Hempel and Schindler. I don't care if they both averaged in the 70s. We don't know. I don't know as the time I'm saying this, but even if they did, I would expect that they would bounce back and play more to their game in the next match. So regardless what happened in that match, whoever wins it, I think will give Dimitri a very tough matchup. You'd have to think Dimitri would get through it if he comes and plays anywhere near his best. Hempel still isn't yet to where he will eventually be as he gets more experience. Martin Schindler is pretty darn close and is playing at a very high standard, but Dimitri is the number 5 in the world for a reason. But if Dimitri is even on his B game, he will be ripe for the taking. And even if he's on his A game but not at his A+ game, there's the potential for an upset there. I'm really looking forward to that one. As from Wednesday's matches, you said Ryan Searle, Willie Borland, right? That's going to be an interesting one. And that afternoon session is one of the more interesting afternoon sessions of them all because of how good the unseeded players are. But the one I'm looking forward to most, I think, is Luke Humphries against Roby John Rodriguez. Like Rusty, who I mentioned just a little while ago, Roby's been having a very good year, and Luke Humphries has been having a great year. Seems to lose at the final every other tournament. So if he gets past this match, he'll go on and lose in the final like he does everywhere else. But Roby John Rodriguez is a very, very tough player and very likely will need that win to get his tour card. I'm really looking forward to that match. I think it's one that, like the other ones, is right for the unseeded player to get the upset if they play at their best game. And then for Thursday, I'd like to see how Alan Suter does against Mensur Suljovic. I think that will be interesting, but I'm going to agree with you that Brendan Dolan, Callan Ritz on paper is one of the best second-round ties, or before the tournament started on paper was one of the best, if not the best, potential second-round ties. It's come to fruition, and it remains on paper one of the best. Callan Ritz, winner of 2 titles this year. Brendan Dolan just had now for the last 2 years has been having a career renaissance, is back towards the top 20 in the world, potential for a deep run to get himself back into the top 16 when it looked just a few years ago that he'd be falling off the tour. Very, very few players have been top 16 players, dropped. Actually, I don't think anyone in the order of merit history was a top 16 player, dropped fully out of the top 32, and then climbed back to the top 16. Brendan Dolan has that chance, but Callan Ritz, well, he could win this and get into the top 16 himself by the end of this tournament. That is going to be one hell of a match.
And now move on to our next guest on this week's show. It is with the boss of MDA Promotions, Matt Ward.
I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the boss of MDA Promotions, Matt Ward. Thanks for the time, Matt. How are you doing?
All right, pal. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. And first of all, how many times have you watched back that 9-darter from Willie Borland since Friday night?
Well, there's 6 million views on Twitter at the minute, on the PDC Twitter account. I think I've watched it about 400,000 times. So I'm responsible for about 10% of or 12%.
Yeah. Well, it's been a busy start to the World Championship for you and the team at MDA Promotions. Are you glad to have a day off today with none of your players in action?
Yeah, me and Willie's going to watch Spider-Man. I didn't really want to go, but he sort of said, I want to go and watch Spider-Man, so he's dragging me along. So we're going to finish up here and then go and watch Spider-Man. James Wilson's coming in later. But yeah, so he's coming late tonight. But we're going for an early screening because I'm sick of staying away from YouTube, from all the spoilers.
Well, we last had you on during the summer series last year, the first PDC event back after the break. What has it been like since then with no crowds and now the crowds being back?
Oh, bloody hell, what was that? Was that the one at Milton Keynes? It moves on so quick, doesn't it? You know, Yoza was well in for the match play then, and you look at how darts has moved on. Clayton was nowhere near like the top 16, and now 18 months later our darts changes. Like, Clayton's one of the best players in the world. So yeah, 18 months is a long time in darts, but I can't really remember. I think the crowds back's great, but you sort of did used to get used to the no crowds. It was a lot easier to logistically to watch the darts in the arenas when there was no crowds. You'd have to go through like a 20-minute walkway. But yeah, it's good to have the crowds back for obvious reasons, for money reasons. For the PDC, they make more money, and for TV, it looks a lot better on with full crowds. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird 18 months. It looks like we might be going back to something similar in the next couple, if the news stories are to be believed.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Well, you've started Ali Pali with 5 players in the field. What's it like managing players in the biggest event in darts? Does there feel more pressure, or how do you approach an event like this?
I don't know. I've tried to just go into it with no expectations, really, because you built the last few years. Obviously, Daryl's been in the top 3, and you think, oh, well, I might have a chance of winning it, and then you get your heart broken. You get a dagger through the chest. So I've tried to go in it with no expectations, because the last few years it's ended with a lot of heartbreak. Like last year, with Daryl was 3 darts away from beating Price, and who knows, he might be world champion now. But first couple of days were a bit weird. Ricky beating Kumar, which I expected, and then Daryl v Ricky, Daryl coming through that one, and then obviously the Borland Brooks game, I forgot his name there, was strange, really, because obviously there was so much riding on it, with Nathan and Willie being such good mates, and Nathan would have got a card if Bradley Brooks had won that game. So if you're Nathan Rafferty watching at home, Willie sat on 60 for the match, he takes out 1-3-4, you think, well, I'm back in it. Willie goes 2-0 up, playing amazing in the last set, and completely dies a death, and you think, last leg, if you're Rafferty, Brooks is going to win now, then Willie throws in a 9-darter, which must have broke his heart, bless him. So it's strange, because all you do is see hotel rooms and venues and restaurants, and you don't really get time to do anything else. So it's a lot of snacks, a lot of watching darts on iPads, and it's not very glamorous at all, to be fair. You're there 4 hours before the game. Obviously the players are playing, you've got nothing to do rather than read the paper or trying to watch football that's not on anymore. So it's difficult. There's not a lot to do, really. You just, if they want a drink, you get them a drink. If they want something to eat, you get them something to eat, and you wait for that 2-hour payoff or 1 hour payoff, depending on it, of the game. So yeah, so a lot of waiting around for an hour-long payoff.
Well, you mentioned Daryl. He's the highest ranked player in your stable. He's already into the 3rd round after Christmas. How do you assess where his game is right now?
He's playing brilliant. He's playing absolutely brilliant. Look at the Players' Championships. If he had beat Ryan Searle, I'd have backed him to get to the final. There's nothing guaranteed in that, but the semis and final were not over a 94 average. Daryl's average 101 there across 19 legs. And I'd have fancied him to beat Searle to go on and win it. He's got a great record against Wright. He's got a good record against Donald on TV. So yeah, I think it's incredible. If against Ricky he did what he had to do. He didn't pull up no trees, but he went over the fence that he had to do. The fence was Ricky Evans. Next time it's going to be Rob Cross or Raymond van Barneveld, and the fence is going to be higher. So that'll tell us a lot more. But I think he's back to playing where he was. He's 22 in the world. If you can name 21 better players than Daryl Gurney in the world, I'll give you £10,000 because there ain't.
Well, we've got to mention the singing too after his win the other day. He surprised us a bit because we didn't actually know he knew the words to Sweet Caroline. Were you surprised too?
I don't know. I've never seen him do that before. He just weird. I don't know. He's probably happy he won. He was 1-0 down. Ricky had 4 darts to go 2-2. He's probably relieved he's not still playing. You know, he'd missed his son's nativity that day, so he was a bit emotional, and he made a fool of himself. But to be honest with you, we've definitely not mentioned it to him a lot. We didn't make a video about the X Factor and put it on social media, so that definitely didn't happen.
Well, you mentioned it was a game between 2 players in your stable, Daryl and Ricky. As a manager, how do you deal with games like that, the aftermath? You've got one player who's happy to be through, one that's disappointed to be out.
Speaking honestly, for me, to not get no grief, the right result happened. Because Ricky is a good loser, and that's probably why he's not been in the top 10 yet. I tell him this, it needs to be more nasty. We went out for dinner after. I guarantee if Ricky had beat Daryl, there'd have only been me and Ricky out for dinner. And after God's honest truth, you sit there and you just see what the match happens. But that's why Daryl's been up there, and that he takes defeat to heart, whereas Ricky's a very, he's a brilliant person. He's a great dart player, but he needs to take that next step. He needs to be a bit nasty and take defeats a bit to heart for a little bit. But that's not who he is. But maybe it'll come. He's only 31, but he does need to get a bit of a nasty streak in him. A bit like Gurren Price, who's ruthless, doesn't care about whoever he upsets. He's there for him and his family, and he'll be your friend, and then he'll fall out with you if you upset him, and all he cares about is being number 1 and winning trophies. And to be honest with you, as a dart player, or as any kind of competitive sportsman, that's how we should be. So hopefully we drill that into Ricky in the coming months, because he is like one of the best people I know, and he's lovely, but he needs to. He's got all the tools to be a massive success, not just like playing, but commercially as well, because the PDC and Sky Sports absolutely love him. So he's a Premier League player, but unfortunately his ranking's about 40 places too low to get in the Premier League. So if he can sort the playing out, he'd be one of the most attractive players for sponsors and exhibitions and things like that. But I say this to Ricky to his face, it's nothing I'm saying behind his back or anything.
Definitely. Well, Friday night we saw Willie Borland essentially complete darts with that 9-darter in the last leg decider. What was your reaction when you saw it?
It was so weird. He'd won the game. When he went 1-0 down, he's going to lose this 9-0, because he's averaging 90 and Brooks is averaging 113. So he got a little bit of a break in the first. I think the changing of the game came in the second leg of the first leg of the second set. Brooks leaves 17 after 9 and messes up on double 1. Willie takes out a double top, and then that's when it completely changed into Willie's favour. Willie started to actually grow into the game and sort of like run over Brad a little bit, and he'd already won the game in my mind. At 2-0 up in the fourth, I was thinking, right, okay, he's won it, brilliant. Brad takes that 1-3-4 out, and we're in a deciding set, 2-0 again with a beautiful 130. So you think, yeah, we're done. Then Willie dies again. But I said to him, it's weird how life is, because at the time of that 1-3-4, you're thinking that's the worst thing that ever could happen to me. That 1-3-4, how's he took out that 1-3-4? But had he not took out that 1-3-4, the best thing in his darting career wouldn't have happened. So I'm a believer in everything happens for a reason, and to be playing so bad in the last set and not hit the treble for 2 legs, and then when I'm going to be careful because he's looking at me now. When you're playing so bad and you go into the last leg, the most important match of your career so far, at 2-2, the most pressure, 2,000-3,000 Englishmen booing you, saying Scotland get battered, to throw your best leg of your life there means you can do anything in darts, and I do mean that. If you can do that at the most important time, nothing will ever affect you. He'll lose games on TV, and he'll get in the future as well. In the next 5 years, he'll have terrible games where he'll probably get battered and think, I never played darts and stuff, because that's what darts is. But when push comes to shove, he can produce that. That means he's got something about him, something really special about him. And I was ecstatic to say the video. If you look at Dave Allen's video, if you see in the corner, I'm on the table jumping up. The security guard telling me to get off the table. It was the most strangest experience of watching darts in 20 years, to be honest. I've seen Daryl win TVs, and I think that the eclipses a little bit of it, that the bullseye bullseye at the Players' Champs. It was unbelievable. I still can't believe it happened. It's the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen.
What a moment it was. Well, yesterday we saw another of your players, Jamie Hughes, in action, a 96 average, but he went out to Raymond Smith. Even though he went out, do you feel like 2022 could be the year that we see him get back to his best?
It was so strange because Jamie's had the best average of all three, I think, and he's going home. And the reason is because he throws back and everything, but he just did everything at the wrong time. Like, you watch Willie's getting back and compare it, like Willie go 140 out, 125 out. He'd do the right things at the right times, and that kept him in that game. Whereas Yoza, feel so sorry for him. Like a 177 to leave 36. Raymond Smith takes out a 111. That kills him for the next leg, and it's game over. And first leg he breaks in 15. 82 after 9, hits the ball, 5 clear, misses. Then he loses the set 2-2 in the first 30. Leaves 47 after 9. Raymond Smith has one sub-par 12 leg of the match, and it's that leg to go 1-0 up. And then you see other matches, I won't name names, but are in the 80s and some in the 70s, and they're through to the next round. And Jamie, a quality player who's an amazing treble 20th, who's going home, but it's sort of like same old story for Jamie, because he just seems to just do the right things at the wrong times, and it's so frustrating because he's so good. But even watching the match, he sort of got that feeling early doors when he kept taking out them 100 checkouts that something wasn't in his favour, and he's the unluckiest player. It's twice he's averaged 96 and lost in the World Championships. Last year against Anamont, he was dosed up on painkillers because he couldn't throw. So it's good for him next year. Hopefully, going in, he can throw pain free. But it's all about getting results, and he just seems to just never get the rub of the green for somebody missing against him, where he can come in. I mean, semi-final of Luke Humphries this year, he misses 119 to get to the final. That they got him in Blackpool and the Grand Prix, and Luke Humphries comes back with a 1-2-2 on the ball. Like, them things seems to happen to Jamie. He missed the 9 darts to beat Johnny Clayton at the UK Open as well, so that'd have been a semi-final place. But I keep telling him that 18 months ago Johnny Clayton was sort of like part of the pack, and now he's 3rd best player in the world, 4th best player in the world. So, and Johnny Clayton is a good player, but I don't think there's many players with natural talent like Jamie. It's just between the ears with Jamie. He sorts that out. He's only 35, so he's definitely got time on his side.
Let's hope it turns next year for him. And last up from the MDA stable will be James Wilson on Monday. He came through the PDPA qualifier to get in the field for Ali Pali. His tour card's on the line as well. How's he approaching this event?
I really spoke to him, so he's on his way later, but James is sort of like when COVID hit, he sort of put all his eggs in the roofing game and didn't really throw darts, and I can understand why. He's got to look after his family and pay the bills. And if you look, he was turning up to Pro Tours, and he was driving, because he lives locally, and there was never good preparation. So it was 4-all. He'd lose 6-4, and I said to him, you need to stay in an hotel, give yourself the best possible chance, and his form's been good. But I don't know with James, like you say, he's got one of the best throws. He missed 9 darts twice in the qualifiers against Andy Bolton and lost both legs. But to get through that, I know it was a massive boost for him, because he's going to lose his tour card unless he can beat Peter Asting. I think he's got to beat Woodhouse, Hettar, Peter Wright. So if Peter Wright gets through his games, so it's going to be very tough. But I think he was sitting like 28th on the averages of the yearly averages, so he's definitely got the game to do it. And it's just focus with James if he wants to give it his all, because this game, it takes no prisoners. You can't do it half-assed. You've got to be all in or nothing, because you get found out by the guys that are really hungry for it. People like Willie, Brooks, Rafferty, Keane Barry, they've seen the money and they want a piece of it. So if you're not on your game, you are going to lose. So James will, if he doesn't get his card through the Worlds, I think he's going to go Q school. But we'll probably have a chat and see if he's going to do it properly and really give it a go if he gets his card back. And because he's only 49, 50, like you say, it's darts really is not age. respectives of Dean Winstanley was finished at 35, that 40 as a dart player in the professional game, and Martin Adams didn't start being world class properly till he was 50. So there's no age barrier. So hopefully he can really kick on next year and get back to, I think he was 28th in the world at one point, or 30th, I can't remember. So he's definitely got the game. It's just, has he got the sort of like, does he want to put things secondary and make darts primary? So fingers crossed.
We shall see. Well, Matt, it's a pleasure to chat to you. Appreciate you taking out the time, and we wish Daryl, Willie and James all the best for the rest of the tournament.
Cheers, bud, and hopefully come January the 5th we'll have another chat. And if we do, well, we'll do some prizes or something, like a signed shirt or something, and if one of them wins it for your podcast.
Thanks again to Matt for joining us. Now we're going to touch on the WDF news about Lakeside in a moment, but one more topic to discuss from the PDC World Championship and the first week of play, and a player in particular is Adrian Lewis. Went out in the second round to Gary Anderson on the second night, outside the top 32 now as we go into 2022. Do you think we'll ever see Adrian back as a top 8 player again?
I honestly don't. And that's not to say he hasn't improved as this year has gone along. He absolutely has. And we've seen moments, when he made a final early this year, some other tournaments this year, we've seen glimpses of him playing at or near the level that for the longest time we expected from him. There's just something completely off about his game, and there has been for some time. He's tried changing the rhythm at which he played. He says he's practicing a lot more, and slowly we're seeing some things that make it seem like he's figuring out how to play a different way. But however that is not the Adrian Lewis that would rattle in a 105 average for fun against Phil Taylor in major semifinals and finals, and would be throwing 180s 2 out of every 3 legs routinely. And the big problem, that at least from what I've seen, is that he has too many visits where that first dart he cannot control. And it's not just like it's missing in a place that's bad. It's missing a place that's bad to follow. It's missing in a place that is just poorly thrown. It's going an inch and a half south of where it needs to, or it's going southeast of where it needs to by that same distance. And it blocks him, and it's forcing him to switch around the board. And it's been the case like that for, the last couple years. That match against Matt Campbell, especially in that first set, but even later on, even when he was starting to get his rhythm, there were too many visits that were over after the first start because he went an inch low, or he drifted into the 5s an inch low. And that's a worrying sign, if not just the odd visit that he's having trouble, but almost every visit, a couple visits every leg, where he cannot find that first start. And I think he's overthinking everything, and he's been overthinking everything. That's why he's slowed down to some extent. That's why he's at least saying that he's practicing more, because he's trying to figure out something to change his game to get back to where he was. And that's because the confidence isn't there. And it's not going to get any easier. It's not going to ever be as easy as it was 10 years ago, because the game is too difficult. He'll have to learn to accept that he can play pretty darn well and still be defeated in an early round, and move on from that and come back the next day. And until he does that, I don't see him climbing back the rankings. He's been getting found out too often, and it's taken or at least it appears like it's taken a beating on his confidence. And I don't see him getting out of this rut. He may get a good run. He may make a deep run at the UK Open, or get next year when he's back in the match play, make a deep run and find himself back in the 20s in the world. Maybe he'll get back in the top 20 with a good run. But there's something about his entire game that I just don't see him ever getting back to being a top 16 or top 8 player. Maybe I'll be wrong. And again, I'll compare this to Michael van Gerwen, who's going through a big crisis of confidence at the moment and hasn't been winning titles and looks like he's afraid to win. Even against Chaz Barstar in that first set, looked like he was afraid to win. But I think it'll come back together for MVG. MVG is on the way back to being the best player in the world. Adrian Lewis is on the way back to being a good player. But that's not what he was. He was a great player for some time, and I think he's miles from it, and I just don't see him ever getting back to the top 8. I don't even think I'll see him getting back to the top 16 unless he has a very, very good tournament in something like the World Championships or the World Match Play.
It is a very interesting one, and it's going to be this is the 10-year anniversary. It's go back 10 years to this time. And Adrian Lewis was successfully defending his world championship. He became a back-to-back world champion in the PDC. He was world number 2 at the time. He was the second seed going into that event. And you fast forward 10 years and here he is. He's outside the top 32 at the moment. Just looking at the rankings as they are at the moment, he will drop to around 38th as things stand, and he could drop lower if other players pick up some more results over the next few weeks. So we could be saying Adrian Lewis is a player who's just inside the top 40, maybe even outside the top 40, depending on how results go for the next couple of weeks. But got a player here who, you go 2006 to 2016, 10 years, he was in and around the top 8 for a long time, and pretty much all of that 10 years, give or take a few months. But now he's outside the top 32, and it is hard to see him come back, isn't it? We've seen him in the last couple of TV events. We saw him against Kim Hybrex and Peter Wright at the Players' Championship finals, and he should have won that game against Peter Wright. You put that Adrian Lewis from 10 years ago against Peter Wright, and he was flowing with confidence. He wouldn't have found a way to lose that game from, I think he was 3-0 up against Peter Wright, and somehow found a way to lose it in the end in that last leg. And even the game on Thursday against Gary Anderson, there was a lot of hype going into the game, battle of back-to-back world champions in the second round, and it did turn out to be a great game. Adrian won the first set 3-2, and after that he won one leg in the next 3 sets, and that's not the Adrian Lewis that we've come to know. But I guess it is the Adrian Lewis that we've come to know in 2020, 2021, that the last few years his form hasn't been there. There's been some signs of it coming back, some big averages on the Pro Tour. I think there was a 110 in there this year, maybe one a little bit higher than that as well. But I think we've seen that the standard over the last 10 years has gone up, and Adrian Lewis, he's not gone up in his level. He's been overtaken by a lot of players. A lot of players are going into games with him now thinking, yeah, he is a 2-time world champion, but when did he do that? 10 years ago. So when you're not winning events like he was, winning those TV events, being a top player, that aura that you have around you does disappear. And that's what we've seen with Adrian Lewis. Next year's going to be a big year for him to see if he can start to climb the ranks again. But once you start dropping, it is hard to stop that rut. And unfortunately for him, he's dropped out the top 8, top 16, top 32. He's going to need to find something to arrest that slide, or he'll be another one of those players that we look back on and say he had a great run at that time, but there was a ceiling for him. There was a shelf life, if you like, for these players, and this was his time where it came to an end.
Yeah, 10 years ago it was the Lewis-Hamilton final. This year, Lewis barely got past the man from Hamilton in the first round, making up for not mentioning Lewis Hamilton on last week's show. We'll finish off with a little bit about the WDF World Championship. News breaking a few days ago that Dartsmith will end on the 3rd of January as the WDF Worlds has been postponed until April. What was your reaction to the news?
Yeah, hugely disappointing, and I've got to say I wasn't expecting this news to come. I thought the event was all good to go. We were a little over 2 weeks away before it was due to start, and from my end anyway, there wasn't really any inklings that this was going to happen. So it is hugely disappointing to see the tournament be postponed, because just got the news article that the WDF put out last week about it, and the Secretary General Nick Rolls was saying that clearly this is a disappointing decision to have to make, especially as momentum and excitement was building around the return to Lakeside, and that word momentum coming up again, because they were starting to build something. It's been a difficult time for the WDF and all the organisations underneath the PDC to get things going during the pandemic, when there's been all the lockdowns and restrictions have been placed around the world. But we've seen since September time, they've started to get events on. Some of their big open events we've seen take place. We've seen the tour start to come back, and they've had the rankings to get to Lakeside. They've had the good news about having that World Championship being on TV, getting the tickets on sale, getting the confirmed lineup, the draw, the schedule of play, it was all heading in the right direction. But unfortunately, they've come to the decision to postpone it until April time. And I know there's been a few murmurs on social media, some people saying that it was due to the low ticket sales, and maybe that could have been a factor. This will give them an extra 3 months to sell tickets. And you've also got to factor in as well, there's not going to be that clash with the PDC World Championship for the first 3 days. And I was just looking at the PDC calendar for 2022 and these dates in particular, and there's a Premier League night on the Thursday, and then I think there's just some Players Championship events the first and the second weekend around that time. So this should give them a lot more, I guess, a lot more eyes on the product, really, a lot more attention from the world of darts for this event. But I think there's no getting away from it. This must have been probably the hardest decision they've had to make over the last year or so. But only time will tell, really, to see how this turns out, because if we get to April time and they are able to put the event on, tickets sell a lot better than they are at the moment, and they have a full crowd in for Lakeside, and all the players that did want to play, did qualify, are able to get over there, then that's happy days. But you've also got to navigate Q School now as well, because you look at the field of players in the men's and the ladies, a lot of those will be going to Q School next month, and if they get their tour cards, they won't be in the field. So you're looking at players lower down the list, if they don't go to Q School or get their tour cards, John Scott, John O'Shea, you got to fancy them to get in the field as the reserve list of players from the rankings. So yeah, it's interesting now that we've got 3 months of more build up for the Lakeside. We know the draw, the schedule and everything, but hopefully by the time we get to April, we'll have that lineup all good to go and there won't be any more delays.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, because as just a couple of days before the announcement, they announced the schedule for the World Championships, and all signs were pointing to the event going on, even though the ticket sales have been very disappointing to date. Obviously, as has been the case for almost 2 years now, things change really quickly. That's the world we live in right now, and the Omicron variant, who knows what it's going to bring come January or February. But there's been a lot of sporting events, both in the UK and in the US now, getting postponed or canceled outright due to the Omicron variant. And all of the signs point to a peak in the next couple months. So maybe moving into April just be safer for everyone, and at the very least easier to do. And hopefully people will be more willing to go to an event once we know more about the Omicron variant, and once we've gotten hopefully through the worst of it, especially if there have been more lockdowns, people will snatch up the opportunity to get out and go to the tournament in April. But I really don't know what beyond that to make of it. Was it about ticket sales? Was it about the uncertainty of Omicron? Was it that they got some news that there's the possibility of a lockdown? Or did the Lakeside venue tell them that they didn't want to be hosting the event right now because of COVID? We don't know, and we can only speculate. But it did take me by surprise. And as I've said a couple times on this show this past year, from when they postponed it a year ago for a full year until now, is the one thing the WDF has been seeming to try to do is to make sure they do everything right, to make sure everything is in place. I trust that everything was in place for the event to go ahead next month, and this postponement really does have to do with the realities of the world right now, and it will be safer and better to have it in 3 months. I hope that that's what it was, and I hope that and I trust that that's what it was, because beyond that, I don't know. I think the WDF is trying to do everything right, and it's making the announcements and making everything and putting everything in play, or let me rephrase that, put everything in motion once they're ready and sure that it will be. So I think and I hope that it was just this unforeseen Omicron surge that's led to the postponement. If it wasn't that, then there are much bigger concerns about the WDF's ability to put on an event like that. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to hang tight for a little while to figure out what the real story is. Anything else for this week?
Got to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us. Big thank you to Willie and Matt for taking the time to have a chat with us earlier today, and try and bring you a show in between the Christmas break if we were able to, and maybe try and get a guest or two on and talk about the end of the first and the second round, look ahead to the third round of the PDC World Championship. And I'm going to get in ahead of you with my sign-off, which is enjoy the darts.
Darn, I got my hang tight in on the end of the last question. But yes, I hope everyone has enjoys the remainder of the first round and remainder of the second round. And I hope everyone has a great and safe holiday break. As you said, Alex, we'll be back hopefully during the break to look ahead to the last week of the tournament and to recap the end of the first and second round. And hopefully we'll do that with some of the players who are still in the tournament. We'll see. We don't want to intrude too much on everyone's holiday break, but if there is something that works for us and for whoever we try to get on, we will do our best to get them on. You'll just have to hang tight to figure out who that is and when that will be. But enjoy the darts, as Alex said, and as I now say.